keep you're helping to keep Carleton Place's tree canopy healthy and hopefully ongoing for generations to come. Carleton Place has always had a beautiful tree canopy over the years, and even with all the development that has been going on here the past number of years, our urban forest group stresses the need to continue to replant trees and to increase our tree canopy for our children and grandchildren as they come. So my name is Councillor Toby Randall. I'm a lifelong resident here in Carleton Place. This is my first term on Carleton Place Council, and I am the council rep for our urban forest river corridor group, which is a committee that reports to council, and we do everything on from tree health to communicate on every development that goes on in town to ensure that the developers and homeowners are abiding by our rules and regulations and bylaws. Tonight we have doing the presentation Mr. Jim McCready. Jim is the head of our urban forest group and has been since its inception. He is a graduate from the University of Toronto with a bachelor's degree in forestry and a registered professional forester and a certified arborist. 28 years with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, owned his own consulting firm called McCready Tree and Forestry Consulting, and has been the chair of the Urban Forest Group Advisory Committee since 1998 when it first came about. He works very closely with the town staff on tree programs, evaluating trees and making recommendations for planting, and has been looking after the bare root planting workshop since 1998. The other gentleman that would have been on the call tonight, unfortunately he's ill, would be Liam McIntosh, and he is the town liaison. He's a public works technician, and Liam's job when it comes to trees, amongst many other jobs that he does, is to determine ownership between the town and homeowners should those arise. He deals with all municipally owned tree issues, any kind of health issues or whatnot. He communicates quite regularly with Jim, coordinates tree planting programs with the Public Works Department, and coordinates the ash tree injection program to protect the municipal ash trees from emerald borer ash. And the other person you heard earlier was Amanda Sharenya, and she is our communications coordinator for the town of Carleton Place. Lastly, just to get a few things out of the way, so Jim is going to go through this presentation. It's very informative. If you have questions, I'm going to ask that you hold those off to the very end of the presentation to let Jim get through this. There's a chat feature that you feel free as the presentation's going along, just to jot your question into the chat, and then I will ask those questions of Jim at the end of the program, and Jim will answer those. And by all means, you can have follow-up questions after that if you have others. And lastly, we'll just ask it, and I see almost everybody here has just mute themselves so that we can all hear Jim and give his presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. McCready. And Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay, Amanda, flip. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. As Toby said, I'm the chair of the Urban Forest Committee, and my background is in forestry and arboriculture. What we plan to do today is we thank you for planting trees, because what we are going through right now is all the best planting sites and the better planting sites are in your backyards and what have you. And council is very much in favor of trying to enhance our tree canopy in town for the values the trees give to us, the oxygen, the taking in the carbon dioxide, the cooling effect, and the effect on health. We've been doing this since 1998. And so after planting this year, we will have planted 2,500 trees around town in people's backyards, on their property. And like I said, those are all the better planting sites. And we thank you very much for wanting to plant trees on your property. We always thought that we would end these workshops, but with more and more people joining in the development in town, they're becoming very, very essential. Basically, this year we have 10 different species. Some of them are large trees, some of them are small trees. And what we plan to do is go through a few sections for you today. Flip, Amanda. What we want on this presentation is going to be divided into 4 sections. The first section is how to plant your tree. And that's extremely important. How you plan ahead of time, preparing the spots, minimizing the stress on the trees, the planting, staking, mulching, everything you have to go through to plant a tree. We'll be discussing this tonight. One of the things that's more important is the actual taking care of the tree once it's planted. People seem to think they can just put it in the ground and that's it. And this is not so. And then we'll get into where do you pick up your tree? How do you pick it up? And when do you pick it up? And then, of course, Toby has already said questions and answers I will ask afterwards. Amanda? One of the things very important that Public Works wants us to do and lay it on the line, you should have a locate for where you're going to plant that tree. And those are free to get a locate, but it usually takes a couple of weeks. So before you plant that tree, extremely important that you get a locate where you're planting that tree, because a lot of the services are underground and you don't want to be hitting water pipes or gas lines or anything like this. So get a locate. There's the number where you get the locate. And by all means, make sure you have that before you plant your tree. We don't want to have any accidents out there. Amanda? Another thing I have to do before you even think of planting that tree is usually we plant in the dormant season, which is the spring, this time of year in May, and then also in the fall, usually in September and what have you. When you decide what to plant your tree, you should figure out what size, how big is it going to be. A lot of people think they can plant a tree and just let it grow. Well, what's it going to look like in 30 years for yourself? So what we do is, how tall is the tree going to be? What shape is it going to be? Scale of the tree and what have you. And one of the important things is we got to be aware of those hydro lines. So what you're going to see here is a small tree where it's going to be planted. It can be planted close to under hydro lines, medium-sized tree, larger trees. And one of the things too is dig that hole before you pick up that tree. Extremely important. Amanda? Here are some of the measurements that we recommend. And Ontario Hydro and Ottawa Hydro has given us these figures. So for smaller trees, you should be, which are under 7 meters, you go 2 meters from hydro lines. Medium-sized trees, anything that's going 7 to 18 meters, 6 meters from hydro lines. And then, of course, your large trees are 12 meters from your the hydro lines. And make sure you follow these instructions, because hydros are the ones that are asking us when we put these plans together. Yes, go ahead and lay this out to whoever you're talking to. Another one that has come up, and I got asked this last year, well, why is the distance different from the house? Well, excuse me, some of the things we're doing right now, smaller trees can be 3 meters back from the house. And this is from our experience. In town here, most of the foundations are not block foundations. They are poured foundations. And usually any damage to a house is because of some kind of damage to the foundation, not necessarily by the tree. So these are the distances that you should be looking at for planting from a house. And see, a large tree, I say 5 meters. And of course, that's those that go in feet, that's 20 feet. And that will give you plenty of space to plant. My tree, I got a 120-year-old maple, and it's only about 8 feet from the house. So, and I've had no problems whatsoever, and that house has been in place since '76. So these are guidelines that we have decided to go by here in Carlton Place. Amanda? One of the things too, prepare the planting spot before you even get the tree. It's very important that once you get that tree, that it's already, holes already dug. You don't have to worry about the roots drying out, what have you. And what you want to do is dig up all the weeds within a certain area and what have you, and dig that hole twice as wide as what the true roots are going to be, and to the depth that it was planted in the nursery. And make sure you roughen all the sides of the soil for quite a distance, because what we want is the roots to go into the apparent soil. You don't need to put in any new soil or anything like this. We want the apparent soil so the roots can penetrate. Amanda?
Jim, can I just cut in for 1 second?
Yeah.
There was a question earlier, and I should have said this before the presentation started. This entire presentation will be up on the town website. So if you're copying down information furiously right now, feel free to not stress yourself out. The entire presentation will be on the town website tomorrow, so you can go back through and make notes or relook at something after the presentation is finished. Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
Excellent point, Toby. And I'm giving you a lot of information tonight, and you may want additional information. And so here it is. And like I said, it's almost roughing. What you got to do is rough that site so that the root system can get out into the soil. And there was an old saying, if you put some good soil in there, what's going to happen? Those roots will just stay around that good soil instead of going into the parent soil. It's like that old advertisement on TV where the kids won't leave home because you're feeding them cheese. Well, the roots won't leave home if they got good root system, good soil there. They'll just stick around in that good soil and not go into the parent soil on each side. Amanda? Minimize stress. One of the big things we have to do is the transportation before you pick up that tree. What you see there is the type of tree that you're going to be getting. That's the root system you're going to be getting. And what we want is those larger roots that you see. Those are the support roots. What we worry about is the fine root hairs. And it's the fine root hairs that actually take up the nutrient and the moisture and everything else. And what we want to do is maintain the moisture in those fine root hairs. We don't want to let them dry out. So when we go and pick up the trees, what we ask you to do is have yourself wet roots, have yourself wet burlap, wet leaves, what have you, to keep those roots nice and moist while you transport that tree home, and just before you go and plant. And make sure during that transportation you don't damage any of those roots whatsoever. It's extremely important. So like I said, have a look. That's what the size of the tree you're going to be getting. And those trees that you're going to be getting are going to be about 6 feet tall and with root systems that are very much like this. If you were to buy from a nursery, what have you, you would probably get them in potted stock, and that's a different way of planting, but this is the way we're going to be planting these trees that we are going to be getting this year. And this is the way we've had it through our programs ever since 1998. And we've had good success. We know where a lot of these trees have been planted, and you go back and look at these trees and they're doing quite well. Next, Amanda. Preparing for the root growth. What you got to do is make sure you plant that tree as soon as you get home. What you're going to do, pick it up from the nursery, have those roots nice and moist. And from there, what you're going to do is take it home and put it right into the hole. And what you can do is put a bit of a mound at the bottom of the hole and spread the roots up over that little mound on the bottom of the hole, remembering that you're going to be planting this tree at the same depth as it was in the nursery. So straighten those roots out. You don't want them in a ball because that's the way they'll grow. You want them spread out as best as you can, and so they're not crowding and crossing each other. And definitely don't expose any of those trees to sunlight or the wind for more than a minute or so, because that will damage those fine root hairs. So be very careful on that point. Amanda? And again, like I said, what you want to do is put that mound in the bottom of the hole. Then you spread your roots out gently over that mound. And then you start putting in your topsoil, the soil that you have, and that's the parent soil around these roots. And you fill the hole about 2/3 full. And what you want to do is at this point, you don't add fertilizer, what have you. You want those roots to grow out into the apparent soil. And if you want to put anything into the hole, you could probably put bone meal, something like that, and use the apparent soil that you have and put it in there gently. When it's 2/3 full, what you're going to do is you're going to stomp down that soil and what have you. And what you're trying to do is remove any air pockets that would be in there, because those air pockets in a hot summer, if we get drought and what have you, those roots will dry out. So what you want to do is make sure you get rid of those air pockets. At that point, then you fill it full of water and let the water drain down, and then you finish planting at that point with the rest of the soil. Amanda? Now, here's a very important thing, and basically, I prefer not to stake if at all possible, because all the studies we have shown in the coming from the International Society of Arboriculture is that trees will establish more quickly and develop stronger trunks and root systems if they are not staked. However, there's 3 conditions that you have to stake. One of them is the tree kind of not big and sturdy, but a bit on the whimsical side, which our trees are? Do we have shallow soil? In Carlton Place, it's called Founded Upon the Rock, and we are on the Smith Falls limestone plain, which means the soil is very shallow. And do we get winds? We certainly get winds, and we're getting more and more winds all the time. So definitely we're going to have to get into staking, and there's different staking you can do. You can use the 1, you can use the 2, ways, and either the one or the two ways that's listed here is the way to go. And you stake it about 2/3 up the height of the tree. And one of the things that's extremely important is remove that stake after 1 year, unless we get drought conditions and the roots don't establish themselves, and leave it in for another year. So, but don't leave those stakes on for any more than 2 years, because we want that root system and we want those trunks to develop themselves and be stronger. So make sure you do not leave those stakes on more than 1 to 2 years. Amanda? Extremely important. And the reason I say this is you want to mulch that tree when you plant. And there's definitely that mulch. It holds the moisture in. It climatizes the root systems. And extremely important to do this mulching. And what you do is you put mulch down that is about 2 to 3 inches maximum depth, and you spread out that mulch about 3 feet, like they're saying here, and you keep about 2 inches away from the trunk. And the reason being, you put the mulch up against the trunk, what's going to happen, it will cause that bark to kind of get a lot of moisture and break off and what have you. And I've seen mortality just because of this. And one of the things I got down there, don't volcano. That is, you put all that mulch up against the trunks, and some people might have seen it out there. Please don't do that. I've seen a lot of mortality in trees where people have done that. Keep those 2 inches of mulch away from the trunk. And what you can use leaf litter, wood chips, shredded bark, peat moss, what have you. You can use that. And also there is fiber around, they call them cocoa mats. I've seen them in various places. You might be able to pick up them and lay them down. But the simplest way, use wood chips, something like this around there. You may have to replace mulch in 2 years. The other very important thing about mulch is it keeps your lawnmower and whippersnippers away from the trunk. These trees, the bark is very thin, and in the early stages of development, they tend to damage very, very easily. So what you have to do is keep this away from the trunk, and then you'll have a healthier tree, and you won't get the damage from whippersnippers and lawnmowers and things like this. Amanda? Now we're into maintenance. You planted your tree. It's there now. It's perfectly planted. It's perfectly mulched. It's perfectly staked. And what do you do from here? Well, you just don't leave it alone. What you have to get into, and I'll cover it, is watering. And a lot of people think when they water their lawn, they're watering their trees. No, this is not the case. Watering your lawn just keeps the water in the upper grass and what have you. And what you end up doing is you end up having your roots up near the surface. What you want to do is have those roots go down, and especially on those hot days and drought conditions, you want the roots down. You don't want them near the surface. So how you water a tree, you take your nozzle off your hose, you run it over to your tree, and you let it trickle for approximately 2 hours. And that's how you water a tree, so that you're getting, excuse me, so that you're getting the root system going deep into the ground. And all its infrequent deep soakings will do it. And basically the rule of thumb is you don't have to water if we get at least 20 millimeters of rain a week. If we don't get 20 millimeters of rain, you may have to water that week or a couple of times that week. If we run into long periods of drought, you definitely will have to water, and you will have to do priority. Your top priority would be your garden. Then your next priority would be your tree, and your lawn would be last priority, because in a lot of times when we get rain in the fall, if we get rain, your lawn will come back. But if we don't take care of that tree, it's not going to come back once it passes on. Next, fertilizing. I told you, you do not fertilize the first year, but you do fertilize the second year. And what you do is you want something that is a very slow release nitrogen, and fast acting fertilizers is best applied in the spring that new growth is stimulated. One of the best ways you can, and the easiest ways, you can go to the nursery and what have you and buy fertilizer stakes and put them into the ground. And they have proven to work extremely well. One of the things you don't want to do is fertilize after August for your tree, as what happens, the buds are being formed. And while the buds are being formed, they are formed towards the end of August. You do not want to fertilize, because what will happen is you may start the growth of those buds, and then you've lost next spring's growth. So don't fertilize your tree anywhere after August is a good rule of thumb. Next. Another big thing that's extremely important we get into is you should be thinking about pruning. And because what it does, it improves your spacing of your branch, it improves your stability of your tree, and annually have a look and start pruning whenever you have one dead branch. If you have dead branches when you receive your tree, trim them off. And if you at any other time you see any dead branches, definitely trim them off. Another thing you want to do is have a lookout and watch that your tree every year, what you want to do, and you can see it. You don't want 2 leaders. You got to prune off one of the leader, the more dominant leader you want left, but you do not want 2 leaders growing up. And I'll give you an example. I have a 120-year-old tree that is about 8 feet from the house. The developer left it there. Has it damaged the house? No, but it's forked. And because it is forked, if I want to keep that tree, I have to cable it. And as a result, I have to have 2 cables in that tree, which is costly. And I have to have that cable inspected every 3 to 4 years to make sure those cables are good and solid. Because if any of those, one of those limbs broke off, very much so could damage the house. So what I would say, if I was around 120 years ago, I would have trimmed off one of those leaders, and I wouldn't be into the situation I am in today. So be careful and make sure you trim off those leaders. Next. And take care while you're pruning. Prune off the dead branches, prune off the broken branches. And a lot of times on some of these trees, and especially if you're getting your apple trees, and you may see suckers coming up from either the ground or halfway up. Get rid of those suckers, because you don't want the energy that you have in that tree going into those suckers. You want them to go into the upper branches. Extremely important. Amanda? Pruning methods. And this is extremely important because I see around town, a lot of people don't realize how to prune a tree. One of the important things that you must be aware of is you got a branch collar, and around that branch collar is all the cells that will help, if that branch breaks off, the tree heal itself. So what you want to do is make sure when you prune that you prune and leave that branch collar. What you don't want to do is prune it too close to the tree trunk or the tree bole itself, because you will cut off those cells that'll help the tree heal itself. Likewise, you don't want a large stem sticking out, because then the tree cannot heal itself, and that's a great entrance place for insects and also disease and what have you. So what you want to do, if you take a look at B making a cut, is you want to use those shears and make sure you've got your branch collar still left that has all your cells that are going to help you heal that tree. On the other one, the C cut of a large branch, you don't want to trim it off just in one cut and tear off the branch collar and what have you. So it's the 3-cut method we asked you to go ahead and do. The first cut is underneath. The second cut is to cut the branch through, so the majority of the large branch falls. And then the third cut is to take the cut just at the branch collar, so the branch collar is left intact, and you have a good trim, and it'll heal itself. One of the things we're always asked, do we put pruning paint on? Right now, the jury is saying no. We used to, and it was found that the tree and its natural cells cannot heal as well if it has pruning paint on as if it didn't. So we'd like the tree to heal itself. Saying that, there's a lot of people looking at pruning paint and coming up with pruning paint that would help the cells heal themselves. So stay tuned on that regard. Next. Now, where do you find and where do you get your tree? Our trees this year, as other years, are coming from the Carlton Place Nursery, and that's on County Road 29 heading to Elmont. And what the trees are in, so starting this Friday, which is May the 6th, you can go and get your tree. What you have to do, the residents must present the voucher provided when you paid. And so you take that voucher and you show the voucher, and on there it'll list what tree you have purchased, and you'll get that tree. And when you get that tree, like I said, make sure you keep those roots good and moist. You have burlap or what have you that's wet for the transportation home. And of course, any payment must be made prior to picking up that tree, and the payments can be made at the town hall if you haven't already done so. There's got to be a cutoff, and the cutoff is May 29th. And any tree that hasn't been picked up by May 29th, the town will be planting those trees in your honor somewhere in the town. So make sure you pick a date, dig that hole in advance, come and pick up your tree, and then from there, plant it and have that hole dug first. So May 29th is the cutoff, starts this Friday. So those that have tickets can start planting right away, and definitely make sure you have a locate done before you start digging. You don't want to get your any underlying hydro lines or gas lines or even your water main. So make sure you're planting them in a safe spot. Next. And like Cheryl Ann says, there's no refunds or exchanges. All purchases are final. And if you don't pick it up by the 29th, it's thank you very much. That would be a donation to the town, and the town will plant that tree somewhere in town, a park or something like that. Next. Okay, here is where you get your questions to us. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And I'll turn it over to Toby, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Jim, for that informative presentation. So I will go back through and ask all the questions. Feel free to just throw them into the chat function. If you're having an issue with that, you can always just unmute yourself and ask a question live if you can't get the chat to work. Amanda, if I can get you to just put us back into the main, get rid of the presentation and get us back into the main chat room. Thank you very much. And so one little housekeeping item before I get to the questions. There are still 9 trees left. So there, we started this the bare root program this year with 155 trees. We have 9 remaining of those 155. They are 3 hackberry, which is the town tree. Is, if everybody doesn't know, the hackberry is our town tree, and I've got a few dotted on my property. They're lovely, got a rough bark, and they're dotted all along the river down past on Mill Street towards the back bridges. And there are 6 honey locust left too. So if you're still looking for, if you want an additional tree, by all means, you can give Cheryl Ann a call at Public Works. And if there's any left, we'll be glad to get those out and planted in somebody's yard this year. So chat, we have questions. And Jim, the first question is, do we have any guidelines regarding how far to plant a tree away from a fence?
Away from the fence, what do you have to take a look at? What size of the tree you're going to be planting and what have you. You must be aware, the law is if anything grows over onto your neighbor's property, anything that crosses that fence, they have the right to prune and what have you, if it goes over to their side of the fence. So you got to be aware of that. And if there is pruning, that has to be done by your neighbor. Hopefully you two talk together about it. So it's more not necessarily in your own property, being away from a fence, but do you want it growing over onto your neighbor's property? And if you do, and it's going to interfere with the neighbor, you should be talking to your neighbor first.
From a town standpoint, I don't believe there are any regulations as far as planting too close to a fence. the only thing I would be concerned about would be root growth, maybe damaging a post connection or a cement in a post. But as Jimmy said, if anything, you want to have a conversation with your neighbor and ensure that, this tree is going to be there for 30 or 40 years. Chances are eventually it's going to grow above the point where it's going to be interrupting your neighbors, but you should be mindful and cognizant of any tree you plant, how it could affect your surroundings. On to the next question. This is a question about digging. Jim, how do I know how big to dig the hole if I haven't seen the tree and I'm assuming the size of the root ball? What's the best kind of depth and width of a hole if they haven't seen the tree itself?
What you do is you dig as wide, and of course here in Carleton Place you can't dig that deep because of all the rock. So what you want to do is at least go down a couple of feet. You're going to be putting a mound in the bottom and then spreading the roots over it. What you want to do is dig, and then if you feel that you've dug too deep, then you put some soil back in when you get the tree back home. We got different size trees and they got different root systems. So that's what I would suggest. You don't dig a deep hole. You dig a hole about a foot and a half deep. And if you get it home and it's not deep enough, you take it out, or if it's too deep, you put some soil back in.
Thank you. Is it possible to overwater a tree if there's more than 20 millimeters of rain that has fallen in a given week? So can you give the new tree too much water?
I would say at times, usually the soil around here is well drained. Where you'd run into problems is if we had clay-based soil, there could be too much. Could be too much rain. For instance, if you had maple and you planted sugar maple in clay in a wetter area, it doesn't like wet feet like red maple does. So there is the possibility you could plant too much rain. Now, saying that, anyone that got the autumn blaze maple, that's a cross between silver maple and red maple, and it could take the extra moisture.
Okay, and again, folks, if Jim hasn't answered your question to the amount you need, feel free just to type something else back in, and I'll double back on it. And I should be telling everybody who's asking these questions. From Ben Gill, in the pruning method example C, there are 3 cuts. Are these done over a period of time, or are these cuts all done at the same day?
All done at the same time. You want that first cut, and then the second cut is actually taken off the complete branch, and then you go and take the cut, leaving the branch collar there. It's all done in one operation.
There you go. Thanks, Ben. From Paul S, how far from a water line or power line do we need to be?
Water line or a power line? That's I gave you those dimensions, and they're right in the presentation.
I think there wasn't anything for a water line. That would be the important thing to get your.
Yeah, I'm referring to the water and power lines in the ground, not the overhead ones.
Oh, okay. So it's the one in the ground you're talking about. You got to remember that those roots travel almost about the same distance or beyond from what you have above ground. Now, saying that, we have water lines all over town, and there has been no real problems in the water lines. Where the problem exists in the water lines going into your house, if the water line is damaged in any way, the roots usually find their way into the water lines, not the other way around. The water lines damaging the trees, damaging the water lines.
So is there a specific like if you know your connection at the street is in a certain spot, is there a certain distance like you're best to keep away from it, like 3-4 meters, or
there's nothing written in stone on that one.
okay, there you go. From Jim Venturi, could you please provide further detail on managing 2 leads, maybe some more visual examples? I don't know. Sorry, Jim, I'll quickly answer for Jim quickly. He can give you a bit more information. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull up any visual aids right now. I might be able to get Liam McIntosh to add a screen, or maybe Jim, you might be able to suggest a website somebody could go to look up about the leads. But his question is a little bit more detail on managing the 2 leads.
Yeah, most definitely. That is a big issue. Basically, all I can say is if you have 2 different look up pruning and leaders, if you have 2 leaders growing up, you want to remove one of those leaders. And one of the things you have to do is, there's a lot more information on that, but you want to take off one of those leaders, which is the dominant one. You want to leave the dominant one there, removing the less dominant one. And if you have 2 to pick from, you have to at least remove one of those. You don't want to have double leaders growing up when the tree's 30 years old. So that, yes. So there'll have to be more information on that. Maybe we can get that on the website.
I'll talk to Liam, but Jim, I would suggest that you probably could look up pruning leaders on Google it if you have the ability to, because not everybody does. If you don't, please reach out to us, and I'll give everybody my contact information at the end of this as well, so that if you have any questions or concerns, that you can reach out to me and I can direct you in the best way possible. But I would suggest that there probably is a ton of information on pruning, and I can speak from experience myself. We have bare root trees here that I didn't get that information from Jimmy, because it was before my time, and we have 2 trees that have literally split at the trunk, so they can over time damage your tree if you don't do it properly. Next question, Jimmy, is how far should you plant away from a swale?
Depends on the tree you're planting. Some of the trees don't mind having wet feet, like your autumn blaze, for instance. So there is no real distance as long as you're planting away from a swale that will be dry in the summer months.
Another question about planting, preparing your hole, Jim, before you get your tree. Just a safe average diameter that for say a larger tree. I think most of these root bases are probably 12 inches to 18 inches max kind of thing. But what's a safe diameter that people can? Safe
diameter of the tree, it's better to dig larger than smaller. So you're looking at a diameter at least 2 or 3 feet.
There you go. This one's from David. I'll leave that one to the end. David's asking for some help and asking if anybody wants to help him plant his trees. From Ryan, do these need to be planted in a spot receiving full sun? In particular, a Cortland apple tree?
Yes, they should have full sun by rights. Partial shade is fine, but they should be more out in the open. Depends on what they're competing with.
More sun, the better.
Yes, more sun the better, especially with your apples.
And then, sorry, Paul, you're asking another question. I don't know if that last one answered you're asking whether the hole should be like 2 feet deep. Is that what you're asking, Paul?
Well, no, thank you. The question did get answered just a moment ago. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So that is all the questions that we've had asked so far. I'll just give everybody another chance to ask any last questions that you might have. And if there aren't any.
Amanda, do you have our contacts there on the presentation?
I don't know if, Jim, I don't know if our contact information was on one of the.
It was on the
I
last
believe
slide.
it was. Just give me 1 sec here. I'll attempt to
Yep.
get it going.
Oh, and there was one more question, Jim, once we get this. So there's the contact information if you want to write that down. For any technical questions, Jim would be the best person to ask. He's got a ton of knowledge and history in the industry. If you're having any questions or concerns that you can't get answered, by all means, always reach out to me. I'm glad to direct you. And if you have questions with regards to location of a tree or a tree that's on your property currently that you have that you're not sure if it's straddling town land or your land, or there's some issues with it, Liam is the guy and the staff member from town that you want to reach out to. And all those emails are people will get back to you relatively quickly. And again, that will also be on the town website. Amanda, when do you think you'll be able to get that up? By tomorrow?
It's up right now.
It's already up. There you go. Perfect. So we do have a couple of more questions here, Jim.
Yeah.
Any special information on a mountain ash? Anything that further information that you might give about that species of tree, Jim?
Basically, I would just look up mountain ash online, and there's all kinds of information online that would be available.
It's the beauty of Google. There's
You
almost get too much information.
Google outdoes us. You know, we put information up on our website, and Google's way ahead of us.
And best place to. Gentleman's asking about stakes, Jim. Just like a 2x2 stake you would get at Home Depot or Rona or Lowe's or something, and just kind of shave off the end of it so you can drive it into the ground. That's all you need. Is it like a 2x2?
A 2x2, something like that. It's a stake. Some people have their iron rods and what have you. That's what the town uses.
I think my dad used to use my old hockey sticks.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and the rest is everybody thanking us. Well, thank you. Man, if you could just get rid of that contact info again, we'll just finish this up. I just want to thank everybody again. Very important. I see another member of the Urban Forest Committee on here as well, Mr. Boyce. Very important, our tree canopy here in Carleton Place, and all of you are taking part in ensuring that that the town of Carleton Place is going to look beautiful for years to come. And I thank you all, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of Jim and Amanda as well, that we thank you. And if you have any questions or concerns, please, by all means, reach out at any time. We're always glad to help you in this instance. And and keep planting those trees. Everyone that goes back in the ground will enrich our children and our grandchildren's lives down the road for sure. So unless there's anything else, I'll just end it right there. Thank you very much, and enjoy those trees.
Thank you very much, folks.
Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night.